Welcome everyone, Questini here with the discussion about both one of the strongest legendary lords in the entirety of Total War Warhammer 3 and also one of the most awful to actually play. And we're of course talking about Vashanar Poison Blades, right? Remember Vashanar? He used to be a real menace back in the days of Warhammer 2. This guy would start near your campaign location and he would end your campaign very quickly. In fact, he's still pretty damn crazy in Warhammer 3. I guess if you're gonna have a Slaughterfest and Wolf 1, Vashanar showing up is perfectly sensical, right? What makes him so crazy is that he recruits Chaos Warriors, Dark Shards, Chaos Knights, and Black Dragons. This is like endgame units that he can get like at turn 20, even earlier. Actually, he's been on the map in Wolf 1. I think he spawned somewhere near Laurent somewhere. And he's been like, he desecrated Safri to a certain degree, and then it's like, yeah, he's just chilling around over here. I actually defeated some of his armies, got a peace tree with him. Regardless, Vashanar is not really the subject of this video. Just this kind of feels appropriate though if you're going to talk about the powerful lord and that's also awful and a campaign ruiner. Yeah, and Vashanar makes sense. No, of course I'm talking about N'Kari. N'Kari in a lot of ways is the best demonic campaign to actually play. Like, step aside Scarbrand, I think Scarbrand is a fairly limited campaign. You enjoy it once or twice, and that's kind of it. But you're always going to play that campaign in kind of the exact same way. Whereas N'Kari has a lot of potential in his campaign, her campaign, their campaign. Let's go there. I think that makes sense. N'Kari, it's probably best not to think about N'Kari's gender in any way, shape, or form. It's Slaanesh and Slaanesh is just something you don't want to devote too much energy towards. But Slaanesh has a good amount of power, and in particular, N'Kari can work very well. Now, the unholy manifestations of Slaanesh are pretty freaking worthless. Like, oh, you get 6% campaign movement range. Okay, that's great. Oh, wait, your army takes 6% damage. At least it lasts 6 turns, so if your units are near full HP, you can do it, if you're willing to pay that cost. Oh, you can reduce enemy growth by minus 16 in province and get 100 devotees. Why in the world would I waste 2 turns on my campaign to just reduce enemy growth? I want enemy growth to be high, because you know how you take higher level settlements? Yeah, you wait for the AI to build them, then you just waltz in and take them over. Oh, you can reduce, you can get a seduce unit budget by 100% and Slaaneshi corruption. Okay, that's decent enough. If there's enough Slaaneshi corruption in the entire freaking world, that's great. And then you can get the Cult Uprising for 5 turns if you're disabled the movement, and Disciple Army will be summoned next to this army every turn. So yeah, the Unholy Manifestations aren't particularly great. However, there are other things that are really, really good in N'Kari's campaign. So first off, you can get devotees for various actions, like subjugating factions for diplomacy. Like when you are about to destroy a faction, like you start a war with Krace, instead of destroying them, you can subjugate them, and this makes them your vassal. Whenever you do this, you get a significant amount of devotees. It's a great way of farming them. So you can build a significant network of vassals, and AI cheats being what AI cheats are, well, you end up with even these factions with just 1 or 2 territories having a full stack of troops. It is kind of amusing to see Katik having demonists in their faction, but you do end up in a situation, or Elfarian having devoted marauders of Slaanesh in his faction, but you end up in a kind of situation where you have a lot of vassals, and each of those vassals can actually have a full stack of troops. And these are not Norscan warriors of chaos vassals. No, these are proper vassals. The significant amount of power they can get through subjugation is ridiculous. Like, consider this campaign, it's turn 25, I've got Elfarian as a vassal, I've got Tyrion as a vassal, and I just got Alariel as a vassal once she gets back up on our feet. Interesting point about subjugation is that when you generally attack a settlement, you reduce its level post-battle, but when you subjugate the faction, like for instance over here I subjugated the Gaian Vale, you maintain the level of that particular settlement. So Lothern may have been reduced, but the Gaian Vale has not been reduced, so you end up with very powerful vassals in your campaign. And you get a lot of disciples, which you can then use to do this. Summon a disciple army. This is not even the strongest one that you can summon, but you can get a huge amount of combat power through this. So there's a great deal of power in Slaanesh campaigns, in theory. I say in theory because there's going to be a lot of caveats that come with this. And when I say a lot, I do mean a significant amount. But each of your armies can summon a disciple army within your campaign. And these can be really powerful as well. Let's consider this. So, disciple armies do not have an upkeep cost. Take that, Scarbrand, in terms of your freaking blood host. They do not have. They do not take constant attrition. They do not need to constantly fight battles like blood hosts. They will not replenish. That's true, but they don't cost money to maintain. So you can have genuinely free. You can genuinely have quote unquote free armies in your campaign. They do cost devotees per turn in order to maintain in your territory, but you can have really huge amount of power during the course of your campaign through cultist armies. You move them in a territory, they take damage, but you can also generate a huge amount of devotees in an Akari campaign. Because another thing you can do is with devotees, you can proliferate cults around the world, and this will target random settlements. So for instance, over here, what happened is I got, I used this twice, and I got 2 cults in Kebie. Now, you can do various things with Slaaneshi cults. You can get the Exis cult Parlor. You can get the Exis cult Den. So the Parlor gives you selective influence, and more selective influence as well when the income of a settlement is 300 or more. The idea that Nangao is not at least at 300 income is a bit ridiculous, but, well, I guess Miao Ying has decided to focus on unit recruitment. But there is a huge level of power in a campaign courtesy of these cults. So you can build selective influence in various ways in your campaign. You can also get more cultists. So you can get quite a lot of heroes in your campaign through these cults, and they're randomized. Or you can just summon a disciple army around half the world. Now, these cost devotees as well, but unlike other campaign resources you might see, you will have a significant amount of devotees in a Akari campaign to actually use. And on top of that, you have seductive influence. The way seductive influence works is that when you're dealing diplomatically with another faction, you trade territory, you engage in diplomacy, you have a military alliance, anything like that, you're starting to build seductive influence. Now, factions can be resistant to this. So, for instance, over here, even though I might have made some deals with Miao Ying, the reality is she's fairly resistant to seductive influence. But you can end up basically vassalizing factions around half the world away. You can't vassalize every faction. You can't use it on every faction. But elven factions, for instance, it works. Human factions, it works generally. Planar factions work. Dwarves obviously don't work. That makes sense. But elves and humans of all types, Kislev, yeah, there's a lot of things that does work against. And ultimately because you can go to a faction half the world away and you get vision on that faction through cults. You can enter wars and you can start building seductive influence over here, or you can spawn a cultist who can create another cult. And so, for instance, over here, I could make the Exis cult, which would start building up seductive influence with Prague. But at the same time, I would also I could also get another cultist to get a cult under Catherine and eventually subjugate both Catherine and Prague in a campaign without doing anything, like without even having to go over there. That is a huge level of power. And while Sigvald and Azazel can also use this, Nakari's ability to spawn armies from nothing really, from just these devotees, and also the ability of creating cults on the campaign map, is a level of power that Azazel just doesn't have access to. That's where the good times end in a lot of ways. Well, actually, there's more to it to say than that. Nakari also has a ridiculous level of damage in terms of his army. and himself, really, or herself, their self, whatever, right? Their person. You'd reduce enemy leadership by -4, so you actually end up nullifying a lot of the benefits they get on a higher difficulty. You get more experience each time you fight a new enemy. You get diplomatic relations. You get the ability to resist melee attack. You can increase disciple army size. You have ridiculous level of power in your campaign. That is, and it's not even funny. So Nakari, in a lot of ways, in terms of the campaign mechanic, the uniqueness of those campaign mechanics, the cults, the devotees, the disciple armies, the diplomatic benefits, is an extremely powerful campaign. Why is it awful? Well, see, all of those things are all great, and they do work. Like, this is the point. Nakari, unlike Scarbrand, or unlike all the demonic factions except maybe the Changeling, and honestly, I will not play the Changeling, but Nakari has scalability, very strong scalability. You play a Scarbrand campaign, it's going to be the exact same bloody piece of crap every single time. And that's one of the things I dislike about a Scarbrand campaign. It's like a one-note campaign. Nakari isn't the one-note campaign. There's huge differences they can have in every single campaign. It can play out very, very differently. The only thing that's going to be common is you're always going to be fighting an Wolf one, though you don't necessarily need to fight an Wolf one, just pointing that out. Oh yes, you should do it for the sake of vassalization and achieving your short campaign victory condition, though to be honest, wins and magic benefits for a short campaign victory condition is not necessarily something you want to push for. You could take your time, genuinely. You could take your time, but your long campaign, short campaign victory conditions do require you to deal with Wolf one. By the way, the fact that your long campaign victory conditions also involves dealing with Wolf one should kind of give you an idea of exactly the kind of level of bullshittery you're going to be dealing with during the course of a campaign over here. It is not going to be particularly great dealing with Wolf one. In fact, dealing with Wolf one, like starting Nakari on Wolf one is genuinely one of the biggest troll moves that I think Creative Assembly has pulled off. It makes sense from a lore perspective, but let me just put it like this. Nakari is hard countered by the High Elves in like so many ways. Diplomatically, yes, you can vassalize Tyrion, you can vassalize Elfarion, you can vassalize Alariel. The moment you do that, you've won the campaign and nothing will stop you. What, you think anyone's gonna stop the Triple Alliance? Declare war on half the freaking world with Elfarion, Alariel, and Tyrion and watch them win. Conquer the entire freaking world for you. Oh, and then the best part is you can vassalize Morathi, Malekith, Alifanar. It's like, geez, it's like let's vassalize half the most powerful Lyrian lords in the game. And you can say, well, Be'lakor can do something like this. He can, and he doesn't have the same ability in terms of like in terms of seductive influence, but Be'lakor can also do exactly this. And that's kind of one of the problems, isn't it? Warriors of Chaos, while they don't have the devotees and the cults, they're substantially better to play. What's the problem? Well, Slaaneshi units, they're kind of crap to actually use, especially against the High Elves. If you started the war, like genuinely, if there was a minor Slaaneshi faction starting an Wolf one, or maybe Scarbrand starting an Wolf one, just to, you know, if Scarbrand started an Wolf one, that would actually be a challenge for Tyrion, Alariel, and Elfarion. Nakari, not much. But if you start over here in the Cast Wasteland and had to make your way in Wolf one, I think that would be a better campaign dynamic than the crap you have to deal with. The issue is, with Nakari, is that, one, your unit recruitment is very, very freaking limited early on. The only units you can recruit until tier 3 that are worth recruiting until tier 3 are the Forsaken of Slaanesh. Yes, you can argue for Hellstriders, and they do have their benefits, but no. Let me just put it like this. Hellstriders can play a support role, but you are going to need a massive infantry to overcome the elves. Now, Slaanesh, the uniqueness of Slaaneshi demonic units is that a lot of them, or Slaaneshi units in general, a lot of them have devastating flanker. Not all of them, Hellstriders may not necessarily have that, for instance, but like Forsaken do have devastating flanker. So what devastating flanker does is that it doubles the charge bonus when you're attacking an enemy from the rear or the flank. And so you have very fast, and you have very fast units. So your quote-unquote unique or reskinned units, if you will, end up being, they're still durable. Forsaken are still fairly durable at 85 armor. They're fast. You have the fastest units in the game, the fastest demonic units, the fastest Warriors of Chaos units, and you have devastating flanker. And you still have Forsaken. and they're still ultimately Forsaken. Later on, you can get Warriors of Chaos and then Chosen, so you have an army that has an incredible level of durability with certain units, and an incredible level of power because of Devastating Flanker. Like, let me put it like this. Chaos Knights of Slaanesh with Lances are probably the best charge cavalry in the entire game, or one of the best charge cavalry. High level of armor, high level of damage on charge bonus, incredible durability in their campaign. It is very, very difficult and they're to deal with these guys, and they're fast as well. Now, mind you, there are units that can compete with them, but all the same, you do have a good level of power there. The problem is there's also plenty of units in Slaanesh roster, especially early on, like Devoted Marauders of Slaanesh or Demonettes that have low levels of armor. And the problem with these units is the High Elves, with their basic archers and spearmen, can hard counter them. So you end up in a miserable campaign situation where you're fighting basically an endgame crisis from turn 1. That is fine for a while until you get really, really sick and tired of it. So a lot of these guys are glass cannons. The demonic units, like the Fiends of Slaanesh and all that, are still demons, right? So because you have demonic units, when their leadership goes down, they won't just run away. No, they'll just collapse and die. And that is one of the issues. You have an army that's a glass cannon army. You can do the damage, but it will take a significant amount of damage. So the level of micro you need to use in this particular situation, including on Nakari and Nakari himself, is fairly substantial. I always find it difficult to say himself, themselves, whatever, right? But on Nakari, you have a glass cannon. You have a lot of power. Nakari getting in melee against anyone, and if you've played against Nakari, you know what I'm talking like. If Nakari gets in melee, you're kind of screwed. But the High Elves can hard counter you. They have a far better unresolved, so you're going to have to fight every single fucking battle manually. Even with mods. Like, I'm not even joking on this. Like, in this campaign I have, yes, it is legendary, very hard with normal stat modifiers. But even with mods over here, you might still, like, even with unresolved mods, Nakari is so awful in terms of the unresolved situation that you might actually end up having to fight battles manually, or using mods that are supposed to negate the benefit the AI gets, the unresolved benefits the AI gets on very hard battle difficulty, but you still have to lower it to easy to get an even better result in case you don't want to deal with that. And the thing is, you end up having to siege High Elven settlements, which are some of the most formidable defensive locations in the game besides Wood Elf ones. Like, there's two settlement types that I really detest attacking. There's the Wood Elf ones, which do genuinely grant the defender a significant benefit. Then there are High Elf ones. High Elves aren't quite as good, but they have such a layout that the towers can do a lot of damage, and you don't have any way of breaking those towers. So enjoy attacking gates against an army of High Elven spearmen, which are gray line holders, while using an army that's designed for field battles. There's a lot of provincial capitals in Wolf 1, and they're a bloody pain in the neck to deal with. And that's before you start considering the fact that you're dealing with some of the most powerful legendary lords flat out in the entire game that are so powerful on their own right that invading Wolf 1 as even someone like Bellicor or Grom is still a very painful experience. Invading Wolf 1 is always difficult, doesn't matter who you are. So Nakari having to deal with this crap is annoying. Noctilus at least can rush Tyrion. It's bullshit, you abuse cannons, you at least have artillery as Noctilus. So your siege tactics as the Vampire Coast do work, and you do start close enough to Tyrion to neutralize his potential. And if you neutralize Tyrion, things get a lot easier. It's still a bloody pain in the neck to deal with Ulfwan, even as Noctilus, actually especially as Noctilus, but at least you can deal with that. Nakari's starting situation over here in Craze, let me put it like this. Nakari has a field battle, that's not too bad. Then he has a siege battle, not just against the garrison, but also against an army that's in that garrison. You know how Creative Assembly has at times removed certain armies because the starting situation was too difficult? Yeah, Nakari has an abysmal starting situation, and the worst part about this is you spend a couple of turns dealing with Craze, you take a lot of damage from those battles, because guess what, the High Elf units, towers, and spearmen will do a lot of damage to your army, and then you get to deal with the full stack of Katik, then you get to deal with Elfarian, and then you get Alariel and Tyrion ganking up on you, and that's fun. The best part in all of this, and it's really fucking great how they designed this, is like, to understand what's really awful about this, you only have 2 recruitment slots in your entire faction, and improving that is well, good luck improving it. That's all I'm gonna say. Like, oh, you want to recruit more units in your campaign? You don't want to just recruit 2 units per turn? Well, get used to spending a lot of your fucking money on global recruitment, because how to say it, there's no other choice in your campaign to deal with that. The power is there with vassalization, but damn, is this campaign awful to play. What's even worse about this is, like, all of this you could deal with. The problem is, Nakari is in this kind of situation where that limited recruitment slot is actually quite awful to deal with. Like, dwarves have a similar problem. They have very limited recruitment slots in their campaign. At least dwarves can play in such a way in battles where they take minimal damage. You will take damage with Nakari. You can abuse certain settlement layouts with cults to get, or reinforcement armies to take advantage of it, sure, but not all the time. And it depends on settlement layout. The problem is, Nakari has really, really awful casualty replenishment. It's probably not the worst in the game. It's not like Siege casualty replenishment, which is quite terrible. But let me put it like this. There is no way to improve casualty replenishment when you're playing an Nakari campaign for either a Lord skill, or if we're looking at the research tree, yes, I got a lot of these upkeep benefits because income from raising, looting, and all that. You know, I just want to, I just want to get that kind of stuff. And right now I'm going on construction costs for all buildings, but we look at the situation over here. We look at the research tree. We look at what is available. There's only one way of increasing casualty replenishment, and it's such a pathetic amount that it might as well not exist. So yeah, that's fun, and you need to get to tier 3 in order to even start unlocking that. That's great. It's like, that's freaking awesome. Oh, and you need to unlock everything else. Having to spend so much time in your campaign just to get 6% casualty replenishment, it is at least faction-wide, but jeez, is that awful. You can use the globe to increase your casualty replenishment. The problem is, this is a growth building. This is not a casualty replenishment building. Remember that particular aspect about it. You may want to build it, but also your income. Like, the thing about Nakari's units, it's like Nakari, some people would say, oh, Nakari has a good campaign. No. Nakari has a very, very expensive, has some really expensive armies in their campaigns, like 4,000, 5,000 for an army of Forsaken, which you want to recruit because there's no other unit you get that's worth recruiting until tier 3. So you have Forsaken, which are pretty expensive. They will outpace your economy. You do have some economic benefits. You get a lot of income from vassals, for instance. So once you build up a massive empire, you will gain a lot of money from that. You do get Slaaneshi Corruption, which gives you a lot of income from buildings, and you can use pleasurable acts to also increase your income and cost your control. Because you actually are playing such an awful faction that when your control is below 50%, you get double the income from your economic buildings. That is still not really a great campaign dynamic to be dealing with during the course of your campaign. You at least can trade with factions. It's not quite as bad as, say, Kairos is or Scarbrand, but just because it's not, just because it's the best demonic faction income, and it is, does not mean it's not freaking awful. It still is freaking awful to deal with. So you've got poor casualty replenishment, poor auto-resolve. You have an army that's going to take more damage than many other armies. Why would you play this campaign? Be'lakor is available for free for anyone who can play Immortal Empires. So if you want to play a nullified campaign with the Damaric army, there's a guy right here who is significantly better. And that's the thing. Like, that's something people need to understand. Whatever benefits you think Nakari has, like, if you want the Slaaneshi army, you can play freaking Be'lakor, and you can make a Slaaneshi themed army, or make your entire faction Slaaneshi themed. Or you can play freaking Sigvald and focus on Slaaneshi units. Or you can play Azazel and focus on Slaaneshi units. Hell, you can play Archeon, you can play Kolek and even get Slaaneshi units in your faction. So it's like, what exactly is the benefit? That you get cults around the world? Yeah, great. That's freaking fantastic. I do love playing a faction that has so much crap associated with it. And also the thing about Be'lakor, Sigvald, and Azazel, they actually have a lot more faction variety than you do. They have a better recruitment system. Because, like, you are limited to either Devoted Marauders, which are crap, or you can get, like, Hellstriders and Chaos Furies. It's like, yeah, Hellstriders are not bad in theory. The problem is that they're also not particularly great, and you have an issue with sieges. So Hellstriders don't really help you with that particular situation over there in your campaign. There are things that work, especially if you have the Champions of Chaos DLC, so you get to tier 3s. Things do start looking up at tier 3, like things like Temple of Decadence will help you out. For instance, with the Chaos Sorcerers, Spawn of Slaanesh, etc. There are things that do end up working. That's undeniable so, but there's no reason to play this campaign over Bellacor's campaign, which is available to everyone. There's no, and if you own Warriors of Chaos or if you own Champions of Chaos DLC, which gives you all those marked units, it's like, yeah, play a freaking Be'lakor campaign or a Azazel campaign. If you really like Slaanesh and the Slaaneshi speed and devastating flanker, just play Be'lakor. You can make an entire demonic army with Be'lakor and have better faction mechanics, better economy, better casualty replenishment, more choices in your campaign. That's the issue. Like, Nakari's campaign is fun once, because bashing your head against the brick wall that is Tyrion, Elfarian, and Alariel is interesting, because it does force you to play to a level that you just wouldn't in any other campaign. You are dealing with a very difficult situation from the beginning, as opposed to the walk in the park that Be'lakor, Sigvald, or Azazel are. That is very much true. On the flip side, there's no replayability in this campaign as I see it. And there's no reason to play this campaign in the long term. You are going to have to face a lot of the battles manually. It's going to be difficult to recruit units. It's going to be difficult to replace units. You're not going to be able to afford a lot of armies. Like, Warriors of Chaos are designed in such a way to have individually strong armies, but have a more limited economy. You have a worse economy, and you are also more limited in terms of the units than Warriors of Chaos. You're limited in terms of the army sizes, you're limited in terms of how many armies you have, and you just have this gimmick of Disciple armies. It works! I'll take Disciple armies any freaking day over Blood Hosts, that's very much true. Even though Devoted Marauders are obviously no Bloodletters, but hey, at least they don't cost freaking income and ruin my economy. But at the same time, like, there's a lot of good campaign ideas, but the actual situation of battles, the limitation, the issue with sieges, the issues of casualty replenishment, the issue of auto-resolve is kind of what ruins it. Like, there are far better campaigns to play as if you want to focus on Slaanesh, or there's far better Chaos campaigns in general. Cosine signing out.